Well, hello, good evening, and welcome to episode 76 of Humanity versus Insanity, the Crane Report. And, well, it doesn't seem like a week's gone by, but it certainly has, and I'm delighted to welcome back Brian Gerrish in studio.
I don't know where the week's gone, Ian. It's just incredible. Time is flying by.
It is indeed. They say a week's a long time in politics.
Yeah.
And it's certainly a year's worth has transpired in this week. And on the Skype link, we are delighted to have Mel Kelly back with us from Scotland. So, Mel, good evening to you.
Good evening.
And thanks very much for joining us again. And a lot been going on in Scotland too. So we'll be addressing that later on. But before we get into tonight's discussion, I'm pleased to report that the AV7 DVDs have been produced right on schedule. So all of the pre-ordered DVDs were dispatched today. So all those people who had ordered either at AV7 or in the interim weeks should receive them within the next couple of days. For those who weren't able to get to the event in May, then the DVDs, it's 16 DVDs. 15 from the event itself and plus a bonus DVD, 16 DVDs, and they can be ordered on one of two places at the moment, which is ianrcrane.com or alternativeview.co.uk, and they will be available on some other places, including ukcolumn.org within the next few days or so. So, and of course, we're actually starting to think about AV8 already, but we're not lining up the speakers just yet or keeping a few slots available because a lot can happen in the interim 10 months or so. So, Brian, you know, last week we had this. So this was the banner for the online version of Humanity versus Insanity last week, the EU referendum, the Bullingdon Psyop. And that's had something like 7,000 views online and another 5,000 on Facebook.
Yeah.
So we certainly seems to be touching some nerves at the moment, Brian.
Well, I think we are. And we've all been spot on with the PSYOP aspect because the whole thing has been pantomime and the pantomime's increasing, isn't it? Theresa May now saying there's going to be delays. So it's all just delay while they continue the route down to the EU superstate. But also, few people twitching that we'd use the PSYOP phrase.
Well, let them twitch is really, let them twitch and let them, do whatever they want to do. Because, let's just refresh our memories. Not that the memories need to be refreshing probably, but this is the official result. 17.41 million people voting in favour of leaving the EU. And this is how that translated in terms of the percentage that voted. 48.1% to remain and 51.9% to leave. And the PSYOP would seem to be pretty much in the manipulation of the closeness of the result. Because not just anecdotally, as I'm going to show in a second, but the evidence would seem to suggest that the magnitude of the leave vote was actually far greater than 52%.
I'm convinced that's true. On anecdotal stuff, I've talked to quite a few people from different parts of the country over the last week, well, whatever it is, since the vote came in. And people are just saying, well, in my area, there wasn't. I barely heard a person say they wanted to remain. So I think there's something going on. But I'll just also bring in, I heard in the last couple of days, a banker was asked about this. And the person said very gently, what did you vote? Thinking he was going to say remain because he worked for a German bank. And the man said, I voted leave. Did you? Why was that? He said, because the power of the German banking industry in this new European Union setup is getting very dangerous. And the person he said that to, I think, nearly fell over that a banker, the real thing, was saying this thing is growing and it's getting dangerous.
Well, anyone that's actually got money in Deutsche Bank, my counsel would be to move it. Because Deutsche Bank is actually in a world of hurt right now. And in fact, of course, now that the bail-in legislation is in place, it means that the banks can actually legitimately use the deposits of their customers to bail themselves out. So although obviously there is an element that is protected, nonetheless, if you've got a substantial amount of funds in Deutsche Bank right now, it is at risk. And you're being told that. I mean, they are telling their customers, and they rely on people just not seeing it or not acting upon it.
Well, it's another one of these open secrets. It's drifted across on the basis that people know something, but they don't pay any attention to it.
And of course, it's another form of asset stripping.
Yes, but I just add, I love it that, of course, Deutsche Bank was one of the big banks underpinning the rise of political charity common purpose. So Julia Middleton talking about all the wonderful banks, Lehman Brothers, role model for young teenagers in UK. That's what she said. Deutsche Bank was there as the funder. We don't know what the other big funders were, but Deutsche Bank has certainly been common purpose, and now Deutsche Bank is going to the wall. Sounds good to me.
Really, couldn't happen to a nicer set of people. Mel, in Scotland, what's your take there? Are you getting the sense that, because of course we're being told that the Scots actually voted to remain, which, as we discussed last week, is a little bit of an enigma, because on one hand the Scots apparently, or a significant percentage, want independence, and yet even more want to be part of the EU, apparently.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a nonsense. It's a pantomime created between David Cameron and Nicola Sturgeon. And just what you're saying about Deutsche Bank, I mean, you really have to laugh at Mark Carney. I mean, he's saying this week, I want to give £250 billion to banks. Now, the Bank of England changed their lending rules, as I've said before, during the World Cup opening game. And the only person that reported it was the Financial Times, the BBC, and every newspaper put a blanket ban on it, where the Bank of England now lends directly to investment banks or casino banks that have no assets, they have no deposits, they don't have customers. All they've got is assets that lose their value overnight, which is how we got the last financial crash, which is why they've never been able to lend to casino banks. So George Osborne and Mark Carney have ripped up Bank of England lending rules without telling the nation, because the BBC said, we decide what gets reported. And this is to circumvent all the banking regulations that were put in place. So because the banking regulations stop these casino banks borrowing from banks, high street banks, then George Osborne says the Bank of England's open to casino banks, so that when it all crashes down again, all that debt once again goes on to British taxpayers. Now you know why we want to go independent. But Nicola and Alec decided that we weren't to be told this either.
Well, of course, this is effectively the UK version of repealing the Glass-Steagall Act, which was put in place in the US in the 1930s to try and prevent another Great Depression. And we know that was manipulated. And in fact, the prime manipulator there was a guy called Bernard Baruch, who was actually the forerunner and indeed the mentor to both Henry Kissinger and Zbigniew Brzezinski. And Bernard Baruch's fingerprints can be found on everything from the setting up of the Federal Reserve in 1913 right through to Pearl Harbor. And it was he who manipulated the great crash of 29 and again in 33. How do we know that? Because he told his good friend Winston Churchill. So Winston Churchill was able to protect his assets before it happened. And then Glass-Steagall was put in place, I think, in 38, and then removed by Bill Clinton just before he left office, or actually a couple of years before he left office. I think it was removed in 98. And of course, we had similar legislation here, but now no more. So it's open season. And this, of course, actually starts to illustrate exactly what we were talking about, which is how the UK is now being set up for total collapse if the people of the country sit back and watch it. But before we move on to that, I do want to show this poll, which was sent to me a few days ago. And this is probably one of the most significant online polls conducted into the way people intended to vote in the EU referendum. As you can see here, it was set up by pollstation.uk. It was a poll that ran from the 14th of March through to the 23rd of June, so 1 week beyond 3 months, right up to the day of the referendum. And look at the total number of votes. The total number of votes was 148,000. Most of the polls that were published were based on literally 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 people giving their response. This was 148,261. The votes for Remain were 24,157, which is just 16%. And the votes for Leave were 120,051, 81%. So, this is what the poll looked like. And whilst this may err on the side of, excessive in terms of Leave, I mean, the information that I'm pulling in from a number of sources now would suggest that the Leave vote was somewhere certainly on the high side of 60%. Yeah. And so, let's cut the difference. And I'd say somewhere around about 65% probably voted Leave. But the establishment, of course, wanted to create the impression that it was a close call, just like they did in the Scottish referendum, that it was a close call. So that, one, it created the animosity and the division and literally fractures families and communities, but also gives them the opportunity to claim that because it wasn't overwhelming, it's something that they can revisit. Yeah. So, Brian, what's your take on that?
Well, I've got to say immediately credit to Mr. Dave Barmby, because Dave Barmby produced the book about the European Union in which he put all of the evidence for how they fiddled the 1975 vote. And at the start of that, polls that were appearing in the papers were showing a figure about what you're talking here. I think the figure in his book is 68%. And then he shows that as a result of the campaign to manipulate the public mind, that was using public money to write letters to the paper, as teams of people doing that as if they were coming from independent members of the public. So that was skewing the vote. They ran the campaign in colleges. They produced booklets, all paid for by the British taxpayer unknowingly. And then all of a sudden they got the vote to a sort of parity, and then it was swung. So he has shown with the comprehensive evidence how it was fiddled in 1975. We've just seen a repeat of that exercise. But certainly all of the information that's been coming into the UK column from people across the country said they do not believe that it was only the figure, for that vote. It should have been 60% or more.
Yeah. So at the very least.
Yeah, and you're right. What are they doing now? Saying, well, of course, it wasn't decisive. It wasn't decisive. So maybe we need another vote to get the right answer.
Well, and of course, the guy that's putting himself forward to either manage the Brexit negotiations, but I mean, actually, what he wants to do is to claim that he's having discussions with the European Union to get a better deal and then set up another referendum. And of course, this is no other than Tony Blair.
Well, you're right on this one, isn't it? That you come in, the people have made their decision. It's leave. They don't want a better deal with the European Union. The vote was on leaving. We want to leave, and this man, that's the best I can call him, comes in.
No, you can call him a socio-psychopath.
Well, I was going to call him a scrote, actually. But he comes in, and why should we pay attention to a word Tony Blair said? He lied over the weapons of mass destruction. He's caused mayhem and death throughout the world, and this is the man who's going to advise the British public on the EU.
I mean, actually, what is staggering is that the media actually give him airtime. In fact, I'm surprised that Rupert Murdoch gives the guy any column inches at all, because, I mean, this guy was giving some column inches to Murdoch's wife, wasn't he? I mean, he was writing about her.
Apparently, but he had nice skin, if I remember. She said
nice legs.
She said, Tony has such nice skin. Stroke.
Yeah.
It's not a nice image, is it, really?
No, not really at all. So, Mel, you want to make a comment on that?
Tony Blair's skin?
Tony Blair. Yeah, but I mean, the one observation I would make is it's a bit difficult for him to conduct negotiations with the EU from the end of a rope, isn't it?
I mean, the way I see it, they made him a title of the Middle East envoy.
Peace envoy?
And then magically ISIS appeared. And anywhere this man goes, bombs seem to follow him. So is this him coming into the EU? Does this mean we're going to have another wave of bombings across the EU? I mean, the man and his wife live off a bank account stuffed with blood money. Yeah. And here this week, today, we're finding out that, this Chilcot inquiry we've all been told about, which is designed to distract from Brexit, so that's why they've delayed it, because they want to take our mind out the fiddled Brexit vote. So let's wait, bring out Chilcot, and now we find out that this inquiry has no intention of investigating Tony Blair. It was all about investigating the soldiers. So the soldiers have to be investigated, and he walks away scot-free. If I was the soldiers of this country, I would make a citizen's arrest of that liar.
Well, I don't think he should be going out alone after dark, particularly anywhere near, say, Hereford. There might be a little bit of summary justice.
He's not a popular man, that's for sure.
I am staggered. I mean, this guy has the gall and the front of Peter Sutherland. In fact, it's a toss-up between the two as to who is the most ignorant, the most arrogant, and the one who lacks any self-reflection, any capacity for self-reflection whatsoever.
I think, Ian, you've just got to look at the eyes. And something I've never forgotten is that when Tony Blair was originally elected, I asked a neighbour what he thought of Tony Blair. Now, the neighbour was a retired man. He was in his mid-70s. He'd been a farmhand all his life, worked with shire horses. So he was a man of the country. And I asked him, what do you think of this new man, Tony Blair? And his immediate response to me was, the man is evil. And I was shocked by that because it was a bit of a stark answer. And I said, why do you think that? And he said, I've worked with animals all my life. And when you get a bad one, you know from the eyes. And I've never forgotten that man's words about Tony Blair.
And of course, Blair was compromised back in '82 when he was reportedly charged under the name of Charles Linton, his middle name's.
Yeah. A little bit of cottaging
yes.
to get on. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, of course, that's how he's managed.
Well, this is the quality of our politicians, and if we look at David Cameron a bit smoother, got a little bit more of the polish on him. The suit is a bit better quality, but can you trust David Cameron? I don't think so.
Well, Blair was cottaging, and Cameron was just pigging.
Yes, nice.
Well, let's take a look at the meltdown here of the Tory party. Here we have the apparent candidates in the current circus revolving around the resignation of David Cameron. So, Mel, which one do you think Nicola Sturgeon's going to want to get into bed with?
Oh, well, I think she's got a lot of common with Theresa May, because currently they're both trying to block the child abuse by the state inquiries.
And they're both childless. They're both childless.
But she's also got a lot in common with Michael Gove, because Nicola's using the referendum. So last week she said to everybody on Tuesday, everybody listen to me. And while she was distracting everybody with EU talk, of course, John Swinney, the finance man, announces very sneakily, I'm going to take all schools out of council control for David Cameron because devolution stops him doing it himself. So, and like Gove, now Michael Gove has stolen billions of state assets off the people of England, because the Academy's bill states that within 3 weeks of Gove saying that a school's to be an academy, the council, if they've got them, must hand over the title deeds for the school and, if possible, the land. Although a few months ago, the Tories have now are saying the councils will forcibly hand over the land title deeds too. So Michael Gove's department gets billions of worth of title deeds that councils have held safely for decades.
And didn't he also bill the councils for the transfer fees of those title deeds?
No, it was the taxpayers. For every school that becomes an academy, Michael Gove is forcing taxpayers to pay £25,000 grant to the academy companies that have got the likes of the Tory party treasurer on the board, and Lord and Lady Harris. And for every school taxpayers have got to pay £25,000 to cover the legal fees to transfer the ownership of the school to the academy company totally free, so that they get the title deeds. And they're setting up the same scam as Southern Cross. So what's happening in England is they now own the schools. They've got the Tory party treasurer in charge of a load of schools. He's sending excess education funds to a Cayman Island fund via stockbrokers he's on the board of. Now, what they're going to do with all these title deeds is likely sell the leases back to their friends, and then what he'll do is sign to rent the schools back. So the schools we owned, he can sign massive leases, so the education funds are used for leasing schools back that we owned, and of course that money will go to the Cayman Islands too. So like the Southern Cross nursing homes, the English will find they don't own any schools anymore. They're paying rent for schools, a fortune, instead of actually that money being used. Now, I wrote to Michael Gove and said, where's the title deeds for the schools? And he went, that's too wide. I said, okay, where's the title deeds for ARC schools? That's the one the Tory party treasurer controls, along ARC Global, no less. And he refused to answer for 3 months. So I involved the Information Commissioner, who gave Gove Department 10 days to answer. The answer came, we have no record, electronic or otherwise, of where any of the title deeds are. Ask ARC schools, i.e. the Tory party treasurer.
Mel, that's a fascinating piece of information. And what's coming back into my mind, ARC, correct me if I'm wrong here, is Absolute Return for Kids. Is that the right title? Yep. So Absolute Return for Kids had a project probably about 4 years ago that was called Project Caressing. And that was to help children understand the loving touch of an adult. And I've never forgotten having a look at that little project because I thought there was something deeply sinister there. But of course, the other thing we should remember about the academy schools is that after the first 12 months, I think it is, that the firm, the company running the school is allowed to set the complete curriculum. So you wave bye-bye to any thought that through the democratic process, the government is setting the curriculum curricula for the school, the curriculum. That is all going to be put straight in the hands of the private company running it. So what do you think they might be teaching our children in?
Well, they'll be dumbing down the kids even further, of course, and literally, obviously, conditioning and programming them with
transgender or whatever it is they want to bring in. Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, I mean, just to touch on that, I mean, and I'm sure we'll mention this when we talk about Theresa May. Of course, she has a history with paedophile information exchange, I believe.
Back in the very early days.
Yeah.
And who are these people? You know, Theresa May tries to make out she's the lady next door, isn't she? She's respectable, the nice clothes. She disappeared, didn't she, while Brexit was all coming to a head and the referendum. And now all of a sudden she's back and being heavily pushed for Tory leadership. But out of the candidates, I think this woman is particularly dangerous because she's running this huge state spying system.
Well, let's go back to our rogues gallery here, because if we look at the candidates, okay, so we got Michael Gove, who has basically stabbed anybody in the back that he thought might get in his way. And my God, he must have some pretty amazing photographs of Boris, because for Boris to stand down the way he did. Boris was clearly told that, unless he stood down, then some information was going to be put in the public domain, which might actually discredit him. So, Gove's a really nasty piece of work, coupled with which he's an arch Zionist. He's a self-professed Zionist. So you can bet your bottom dollar that if he becomes leader of the Tory party, then he will be taking his orders from Netanyahu.
Well, just follow another path through, Ian. Of course, he was under the the pupillage of Gordon Brown, and also he was based in Aberdeen. And as we see the child abuse story unfold and unfold, we've got Gove, who was the man who said no, we don't want any investigations into child abuse. a jigsaw is coming together. We can't put all the pieces exactly where they go, but you can see the picture that's building.
Well,
Utter dirt. So Gove, blackmailed Boris?
And I think if Gove becomes the leader, then, there will be certainly people doing a bit more digging. And he will not be getting a free rein, that's for sure.
And what happened to his biography, which was mysteriously cancelled? It was due for publication 2 weeks ago, ready to go, and then all of a sudden, no, we're not going to publish his biography. Now you say, why not? Because there was obviously something in there, political or damaging, about his background. I don't believe a word of his background. He was brought up by this ordinary working couple, and then he starts writing for one of the local papers, and the next minute Gordon Brown's got hold of him, and then all of a sudden he's levered through into politics. I know exactly what you're thinking. And
I'm not going to say a word. Anyway, so let's move across our rogues gallery. Then we have Andrea Leadsom, who is known within the anti-fracking community as Andrea Loathsome, because, of course, she is the Minister for Energy, and she has been an arch proponent of the unconventional gas industry. So her background apparently is city finance, and certainly she clearly does not have the best interests of the British public at heart, and that's illustrated by her outrageous support for an industry that has left such horrendous devastation wherever it has become established around the planet. So, and then in the middle there, we've got Mr. Crabb. And he, of course, has come out of nowhere.
Well, honestly, I've got to admit, I don't know a lot about him, but I look at him and I just look at that trimmed beard and I get a hint of something. Mungo Jerry, was that the man he reminds me of?
Liam Gallagher? No.
I don't know what it is, but who is this man? Who is he?
Well, he's, of course, taken on the mantle of Ian Duncan Smith as head of DWP. Right now he's in the role of state executioner. Then, of course, we have Theresa, who we've just been talking about, and then Liam Fox. And, of course, Liam Fox, his reputation was somewhat sullied when it became apparent that he was tripping around the world with a close confidant selling arms to the Saudis.
Well, and the confidant was getting into government meetings, which he shouldn't have been allowed into, effectively claiming that he got the security clearances. So Fox eventually steps down because he's dirty. Now, all of a sudden, apparently, he's clean enough to become Prime Minister. And we haven't even got talking about, the British American bridge. It'll come to me in a minute, but he's involved with these cross-Atlantic organisations, which are all big corporatist money, heavily involved with Israel. And, was dirty, been out of the limelight for a bit. Now he's been dusted off and he's clean enough to become British Prime Minister.
So the bottom line is, would you really...
choose any of them?
No.
No.
I think we can safely say no. Which is yet more reason why it is so important for people to get involved. And I just want to flag this up because this was sent to me by somebody in education, somebody who's worked at a very senior level in education in the UK. And they said that basically nobody who is an education professional can actually mention this man's name without gagging or want to spit.
Yeah.
He is absolutely hated within the British education system.
Yeah. I can imagine that. I can't really add any more to that, but dangerous man. Right, so that's the Tories, and of course one of those is going to be the unelected Prime Minister. They have no mandate whatsoever, but of course they cannot call an election because we now have fixed-term parliaments. Well, absolutely. That was a nice little dictatorship move, wasn't it? That if things get dodgy and the public should come in and make a decision and you need to dissolve Parliament, we don't want that to happen. We want it locked into a nice 5-year Soviet segment.
So if I was a conspiracy theorist, I mean, I could quite understand somebody suggesting that, that somebody had the foresight here they'd seen the meltdown coming and wanted to make sure that basically the British public couldn't get a change of government and just had to swallow whatever was thrown at them.
We are being led into chaos. We can see it developing because Tory party is now, we've got the warfare going on in the Tory party, we've got warfare going on in Labour Party.
Well, let's talk before we get to Labour, let's come to UKIP, because here's the man. For 17 years he's fronted the campaign to get Britain out of the EU, and he's certainly entertained millions in this country with his speeches in Brussels. But now he's achieved that goal, and obviously some credit goes to him for actually forcing the British government to, or to the Tory party, to campaign on the basis of holding a referendum. But now he's gone and resigned.
Well, I think it makes complete sense, Ian, because this man's job was to wave the flag and lead UKIP into a corral. His job was to make sure that the 4 million people who ultimately ended up voting UKIP just didn't get out there doing what was necessary. He's given these rousing speeches in Europe, but he hasn't given the right speeches in UK. He hasn't talked about law and order. He hasn't talked about jobs. He hasn't talked about the decline of industry. He has been a one-man pony trick in the European Union. And if you say, what has he actually done to motivate and lead his UKIP supporters? Nothing. Nothing at all.
Nothing at all. I mean, yeah, it has no UK policy, no foreign policy.
And now just when people talk about the morale, I could actually get going on this subject because I've watched Nigel Farage for so long. Just when there's now an advantage where he could be out there really motivating people to take this government apart, I'm going to resign. I've done my job. Well, what's he done? We've got Brexit. That's not UK out of Europe, is it?
Not at all, by any stretch of the imagination.
So this man is, as far as I'm concerned, he's a political con. He always has been.
And he's done very well out of the EU gravy train.
Well, of course, that's what he's done. He's been over there, fed off the gravy train, spouted the right words. But in a minute, we've got a photograph of him, which I can't resist. Well, there's a couple of them. So, we've got one here. Just if you press the button again, we'll get the little tweet that came with it. This is it. Sent out by Lily. Now, I'm not really good on poppy.
It was Lily Allen, yeah.
Yeah, so Lily Allen, whoever she is, but well done, girl, because she went to a little drinky poos, as it's called, and she spots Rupert Murdoch having a nice chat with Nigel Farage. And you think that's an interesting combination. But if you go to her next tweet, it gets even better because she took a nice little video clip of Liam Fox, Rupert Murdoch and Nigel Farage obviously sharing a nice little spot on the top table. So what was this about? What was this about? Would you want to sit down with Rupert Murdoch or Liam Fox?
Well, they're all part of the pantomime. I mean, it's the cast, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we might have one more if we can just bear it, because this one I just loved, because have a look at those two grasping each other.
Yeah. Well, we'll come on to Nicola Sturgeon, obviously.
Well, okay, but she doesn't want to get too close to that man, and I don't blame her. So just press the button and let's have a look at the next bit, because here was Juncker grasping Nigel Farage and whispering in his ear. Now, Nigel Farage is supposed to be one of the most hated men in the European Union. This man has worked for 17 years to destroy them, and Mr. Juncker is clasping his head and whispering something in. I want to know what he whispered in his ear. I think I know what it was. Well done, Nigel. That's what I think was being said here, because he was basically telling him, you've done a great job, because what has Nigel Farage assisted in? The breakup, or the near breakup of the United Kingdom.
And Mel, of course, alongside that, we have Juncker doing something very similar with Nicola. So Nicola was swanning around Brussels last week. What's your take on that?
Well, Rupert Murdoch was up having dinner with Donald Trump in Scotland, and the wonderful golf course up north that Nicola and Alex said Trump could build, that professional golfers have all boycotted. Nicola's been in secret talks. She was caught with her Tory pants down again, having secret talks with Donald Trump. and then over our nationalised airport. And when she was caught there having a secret meeting with him, she actually said the words, "Oh, but I've no power to stop anybody talking to Donald Trump over our nationalised airport." Now, she's in complete control of it. So she's doing secret deals with the Chinese, with 2 Tories from London who actually negotiated the deals. She sneaks them into Butte House. She sneaks about with Donald Trump holding meetings over our airport. And then Rupert Murdoch and Trump were meeting last week in the golf course, and they wouldn't give a guest list. Was Nicola there too?
Was she?
Well, I wouldn't be surprised if SNP representation was with that secret meeting, because that's all that the SNP do, is sneak about behind our back. With Rupert now, she went to America not long after she got made First Minister, and she actually hid off of her diary that she was going to meet Donald Trump. But again, she got caught with that secret meeting. She's not really very good
Yeah, really?
what's going on. But so she goes to America to get her orders from Rupert Murdoch.
Well, you know, Rupert Murdoch has never lost an election since he took ownership of the Sun. So, you know, there's no question that, you know, he considers himself to be a significant game maker. But okay, we've talked about all of the leaders. Now let's come on to Jeremy. Of course, Jeremy Corbyn, they tried to manipulate a coup. It was obviously extremely well choreographed. I mean, anybody who suggests that the consecutive resignations weren't choreographed weeks ago is living in cuckoo land. And of course, this again is part of the psyop. And a massive part of what's occurring here is obviously to try to protect Tony Blair's butt.
Yes, that's it, isn't it? I mean, you just follow this thing through. An organised coup against Corbyn, without a doubt. And it's going to be interesting to see what now transpires.
Well, the people of the country have responded remarkably. I gather that the Labour Party membership has risen exponentially since the coup. And, you know, clearly, although he's not flavour of the month in Westminster, he has certainly struck a chord with the wider populace.
Yeah, because although we might not agree with some of his views, in general, I think a lot of people would say this guy actually says what he really does believe. So he's straighter than the rest of them. I think that's what they pick up.
Well, I mean, I made the observation in an interview that I gave last Friday, I think it was. And I said, you know, basically Jeremy needs to grow a set because, you know, all the way through his political career, he's been confident, he's been independent, he's been his own man.
Yeah.
And now, of course, he finds himself in the leadership role with all the, not only the sycophants, of course, it should be psychophants, but all the sycophants around him. And of course, also the manipulators who are trying to tell him how he should behave, and this is what you need to be doing, Jeremy. But you know, Jeremy, you know you've got yourself this far on your own merits.
This is absolutely true, and he's got another fantastic weapon, which is he did sign the early day motion for the Bradbury pound. So. The top tier of his team know that there is a monetary solution to the mayhem that we're in at the moment.
And the monetary solution can only be applied once Article 50 has been invoked. Because Article 123 of the Treaty of Lisbon actually prevents any country from initiating any other form of monetary system other than fractional reserve banking. So for the Bradbury pound to become a reality or anything similar, Article 50 has to be invoked, and then Article 123 overridden.
1972 Communities Act, I think, is the one that needs to go.
The European Communities Act, yes.
We are being
absolutely
told it's Article 50, but actually what needs to take place is a change of that act in our Parliament. That's the first marker that goes down.
Indeed.
And then the rest follows. So I think Article 50 is at the moment another smokescreen because it's the wrong thing to focus on. They continue to delay it and we're not going to get where we need to be. So this is the point, if I can just come back to Nigel Farage. We are told there are 17 million people out there who want to get out of the European Union. You're saying it's much higher. Even if it's 17 million, this is a lot of people. If they are given the right things to do, they know what the truth is, they know what they've got to be asking, demanding of their MPs, they're going to force it through. It's an information war, isn't it? And at the moment, we've got to get the right information to the people who instinctively know we've got to get clear of the EU.
One or two things, though, is going to happen here, and that is either this total farce, this charade, this pantomime is going to have people just throwing up their hands and saying, oh my God, politics, what a ridiculous arena that is, and then just carry on with their lives, which is what they want to happen. Yeah. Or it's going to nurture and stimulate people to actually say, well, hang on a goddamn second, there's something not right about this.
I think that's happening.
And get involved.
I think that's happening, Ian. I think there is a change. The change has been going on for the last 9 months, year, but we are now starting to see something. This is all anecdotal stuff, but I always pay attention to it. Lady said she went in the hairdressers recently, mentioned Europe, thinking this is going to be a bit of a hot subject. And the man in there said, I'm not hearing any, this is all I'm hearing about, people talking about coming out of Europe, and they want to come out of Europe. So I think people have almost been triggered out of some of the apathy, and for whatever we're doing, we've got to provide people with the right evidence and ammunition that they can actually get on and tackle these idiots that we've got in Westminster.
Mel, what's your take from north of the border?
I think one of the most interesting things about the pantomime all the politicians are putting on, courtesy of Rupert Murdoch, is Nicola is the one person that's lost 2 referendums in a row. And yet the British media and Rupert Murdoch and the Daily Record, nobody's calling for her head. Nobody's calling for her resignation. Now, the Daily Record won't, because she appointed their chairman, as I say, to be their PFI Quango King. So she not only got Rupert Murdoch's full support to covering up the deal she does between her and Cameron, selling Scotland out while she performs the play. She's also got the Daily Record in her pocket. Now, they claimed the Daily Record was the enemy of the Yes campaign, and they didn't tell yes or no voters that the Daily Record chairman is a merchant banker who peddles porn on Rupert Murdoch's TV chat skyboxes. He used to be the ex-vice chairman, vice being the operative word here, of Royal Bank of Scotland. And Nicola Sturgeon in 2008 and Alex Salmond appointed this banker to be their PFI King of Scotland, to dump 30 billion more PFI on us, when they told everybody, PFI's gone, that's it. So when you've got a banker, a government and a newspaper merged into one. Now, he formed a company called Charlotte Street Partners, and it was actually an SNP MP, Andrew Wilson, that proposed Devo Max, where the rich people of Scotland can keep the loopholes, tax loopholes of Westminster, and then get new loopholes via the SNP. So the chairman of the Daily Record forms Charlotte Street Partners. He's in the Scottish Parliament. He teams up with the SNP guy that wants to get Devo Max and the communications director of the SNP referendum campaign. So they all team up to get no together.
Well, and of course, the reality is that you said that Nicola Sturgeon had lost the referendum. I don't think she did, because Nicola Sturgeon and her husband, the party chairman, know very well that the moment that Scotland gets independence, the SNP is effectively redundant. The only way the SNP stays in power is to keep the carrot at the end of a very, very long stick of a potential referendum. So Nicola, that's why Nicola has basically said there's not going to be another referendum in this parliament, maybe in the next, because she's looking obviously 5 years down the road, because of course it was 4 years, now it's a 5-year term in Scotland. And, she's looking to get another term. And then, of course, there'll become another reason why it is that, she wants to delay the next Indie ref, because she knows the only way the SNP stays in power is to keep the promise of an Indie ref at the forefront of people's minds.
Complicated.
Exactly. So now, I mean, I just want to take a look at, the markets, because obviously we had all the initial fallout, we had all the panic. But as I said last week, those people who have played the gold market have done very, very well indeed, because, if we look at what's happened with gold, I mean, this is where it sort of bottomed towards the end of last year. And then gold was on the rise, and then this is the fall. This is basically the Brexit. Whoops, let's go back to that again. This was the immediate impact of Brexit, but then it recovered very quickly. And in fact, gold is right now back well into the 1300s. So once again, anybody that has put their confidence in gold, which is, as Ron Paul said in front of the Senate committee, it's been the mainstay of protecting the purchasing value of your wealth for 6,000 years, and so it isn't going to change anytime soon. So obviously, there's other ways in which you can make a fast buck, but if you want to protect your assets over the long term, then gold is and will continue to be the safe haven. Of course, it's a long way shy of the $1,900 high in late 2011, and then the $1,800 high, which it last achieved in 2012. And it's been coming down since, as people got more confidence and took their assets elsewhere. But now gold once again is that safe haven. So the reality is that the bottom line is that really after the immediate media hype of Brexit, everything's calming down, nobody's losing jobs. But the reality is we're not moving at the moment towards what at least 17 million people, probably more, have voted for, which is to get out of the EU and open our trade to the rest of the world.
Well, because the government had no intention, never had any intention, because they are totally committed to the European superstate. It's no surprise for me, no surprise to the UK, Colin, because we've talked about this on and on and on, and now we're seeing the thing happen. So we have the referendum decisive result, and what's the government going to do? Delay, stall, lie, and the key bit, which we will keep coming back to, is the fact that they are slaughtering the military in order to make sure that what's left of it is simply subsumed into the EU military. Then you don't, then you don't have a country.
Exactly.
Gone. It's gone.
So here's the bottom line. That we have a tremendous opportunity. 17 million people, at least 17.4 million people, at least, voted to get out of the EU. And the establishment are now banking on 17.4 million people doing nothing, just sitting back and saying, oh, well, we voted, now we'll leave it to the politicians, which is, of course, exactly what they want everybody to do, because they don't care why you or I or anybody else doesn't get involved, as long as we don't get involved, because they just want people out of the way so that they can get on with their manipulation and their games. But this is a very real opportunity. So if 17 million people, or even half that number, actually made a commitment to get involved in something, to get involved within their local community, to start holding their elected representative to account, to scrutinise their every move, to scrutinise their every vote, to scrutinise what they're doing on a day-to-day basis in return for their outrageous salary and unlimited expenses. So this is what we can do, and this is a tremendous opportunity. So Brian and I and one or two others, we're going to be doing a series of events in the early autumn, which is going to be looking at Brexit, the post-Brexit period, opportunity or catastrophe. Now, whether it's an opportunity or whether it's a catastrophe is absolutely dependent on whether or not the people of this country decide that they're going to take this, grasp this opportunity with both hands and get involved and change the political landscape for something that is inclusive, that doesn't leave anyone behind. And I'm not paraphrasing the Tony Blair statement, no child left behind. But we have an opportunity here to make sure that basically every person in society is either given an appropriate opportunity for employment, or if they're not able to find employment or they're not capable of working, then they are at least taken care of, because this is supposedly a first world nation. But we are looking more and more like a banana republic, and we can blame it on the politicians, but actually, you know what? It's us. It's all of us allowing them to behave in this way, to milk the system, to take their salary, to take their expenses and say, you know what, screw you. Well, it's our turn now to take an opportunity to get this country back on track. But it needs every one of us watching this, and of course people who we talk to nurture, to encourage them. It doesn't matter what they get involved in. There's so many things to get involved in, but get involved in something. Find something that's close to your heart and get involved. Brian.
What do I add to that? Well, I think I want to add something quite simple, and that is those 17 million people voted to come out of the EU. What are they interested in the EU? What should we talk to them about the EU? We should be feeding those people with all of the facts and truth and reality about the EU, where it started. Let's get them looking back to the Red House meeting and the connections with the Nazi regime. Let's have a look at how the money's been manipulated. But what do they want to know about? They want to know about the European Union, so we should tell them.
And how we can be better off outside of it.
Well, of course, but a friend of mine who spent some time as a local councillor said to me on one occasion when we were talking about, I'll say high-level politics, he said, no, what engages people? It's problems in their locality. You want to get these people on board, talk about potholes in their road, and they will be with you. And I think this is a very astute comment. So it's no good going into this 17 million audience and getting really excited in the first instance about another topic. What do these people want to know about the European Union? Get them interested on that, feed them on that, then you start talking about the other issues.
Absolutely.
So it's tactics, isn't it? It's what we're talking about. Yeah.
Mel.
What about Mel? Yeah.
Well, I mean, just you talk about misinformation and get involved. There was a completely untrue report in newspapers up here this weekend saying, oh, Brexit will cost Scotland, we will lose about 300 million EU money, which was a lot of tosh, because actually Scotland has to, by the time you factor in what money the EU gives us after we've given it, it's costing Scotland something like 25 million a week. So they're trying to tell us that we will lose out of this, that currently we are benefiting more, when it was a complete lie in the newspaper, because we're not. It costs us 25 million a week, because ours is about 10% of what Britain contributes, and that's what they've said. But the figures that have been bandied about are completely untrue. Yes, we get money back, but it nowhere near covers what Britain gives the EU.
And we can do this, we can talk to people, because we don't have any political axe to grind. You know, we don't have any political ambition. The only ambition we have is that basically we bring a new political landscape to this country, and we give politicians who actually have the best interests of the people at heart an opportunity to express their voice, as opposed to the politicians who are looking after the corporations.
Can I just add a bit in there? This is a personal opinion, but if somebody says to me, what do we need to correct this situation? We've got to have a clean sweep of politicians in Westminster. I don't have any doubt about that. But personally, I believe that we need to get rid of political parties, because the political parties are pyramid structures. So you get the right people in the top tier, they control them. Nigel Farage did a brilliant job. And of course, they use the whips. So in comes the blackmail to make sure people toe the line. Get rid of the parties. Every single person who's elected for Westminster should be elected as an individual. Their loyalty is to the constituents who elected them. And we should have the party system outlawed. A whipping system should be outlawed. And I also believe there should be severe penalties or the membership of any secret societies by our elected members.
Absolutely.
And that hasn't got to be focused in one direction. I think that needs to be quite broad-reaching. If somebody is caught conspiring behind closed doors with other individuals to subvert policy, that doesn't get rid of free speech. But if it is clear conspiracy to subvert politics, particularly against the best interests of the nation, those people should be faced with severe penalties in the court. But you analyse what has happened to date. The whole structure is rotten. Why is it rotten? Because of the blackmail by which they're bringing these people in. And isn't it, perhaps Mel might like to answer this, but isn't it interesting that, of course, we've just had the head of the child abuse inquiry in Scotland resign. Professor Lamb, I think it was, resigned a few days ago. What are they talking about? Manipulation of the inquiry by the Scottish government. Why is the Scottish government doing that? Because they have to keep a lid on the child abuse, which is being used to blackmail individuals to run the whole corrupt system. But you will probably know more, Mel, I think.
Yeah, I mean, Nicola dragged her heels. She was the very last in the UK to set up the inquiry. She's very spitefully recently took all the funding off the charity that supports the victims. She is the only leader to time bar victims' testimonies. And here we have the two of the members of the committee now down. One last week saying they are resigning in disgust at the interference by the Scottish government in this inquiry. They are trying to block it every step of the way, just like Theresa May. She was appointing people with vested interests. So we've got Nicola Sturgeon up to her eyes in Scotland and actually interfering in an inquiry that's all about children being interfered with by state officials. Now, what I would say when you're talking about secret societies, I was taking a look this weekend at the Privy Council. Now, there is the biggest secret society, secret meetings. Who still sits in that Privy Council? Tony Blair. Who else is on it? Nicola Sturgeon and Alex Salmond. This is the council that controls everything in this country, and that is the one society that needs shut down right away. Because when you look at the list of people on the Privy Council, and go on Wikipedia and look, everybody. But that's the secret society that runs Britain. The judges, the corporate boards, the Tony Blairs, the Gordon Brown, and Nicola and Alec swan in there and pretend to the people of Scotland that... Now, Tony Blair, he's got this Chilcot report months in advance. So is that Privy Council. Alex Salmond's in it. And yet he dared to write an article this weekend saying, oh, I'm really looking forward to seeing the Chilcot report on Wednesday. We all know the Privy Council controls it. They're the ones that decide that everything that goes in it. And then everything that Rupert Murdoch should print and everything the BBC should say, that is the cancer of Britain. That's the British that are against the Scottish, the English and the Irish and the Welsh in this country.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Mel, I'm going to say really well said, because of course you're absolutely right. The Privy Council is a disgusting organisation, and people really need to have a good look at it. There is quite a lot of information on the internet. But isn't Nick Clegg still in there somewhere, I think?
I don't think anybody leaves once they're in. But I think what happens is they all go to university. They're approached because the Privy Council controls universities in Britain. And this is how the power structure works. The most intelligent people go to university. The Privy Council approach them and say, right, I know you're bright. Are you greedy? Are you willing to sell your soul? Work for us for a living, lie for a living instead of working for a living. And we will guarantee you can slither up that greasy pole to power. We'll get Rupert Murdoch to back you. He backed Thatcher, he backed Blair, he backed Nicola and Alec. So this is how it operates in Britain. The Privy Council takes the brightest, they bribe them at university and say, we will guarantee you riches for life and a seat on that Privy Council if you do what we want once you get in the position of power. Jeremy Corbyn's the only person that didn't want to join, because he knows, I'm not having my soul corrupted by that shower of Brits. He represents England. He's an Englishman with morals. Whereas the amount of Scots and the amount of English and Northern Irish and Welsh that sit in that Privy Council selling their country out because they've all decided to be British.
So,
And
Mel, we're coming to the end of the show, but in a one-word response, Brexit, opportunity or catastrophe?
Opportunity.
Brian?
Certainly opportunity, but we've got to work hard to make it the opportunity. That's how I feel.
Well, that's three of us all of the same accord here. And as Brian made the observation earlier, we need to obviously be talking about the subjects that people want us to talk about and use those as the primers to be talking about other subjects. And nobody's more surprised than me since posting the extract, the 35-minute extract from my AV7 presentation just a little over 4 weeks ago. This was the screen grab from YouTube just before we went to air last Monday. 181,000 views in a little over 3 weeks. So in the week after the referendum, it's gone up to 312,000 views.
Brilliant.
This is 20% of the total views on my YouTube channel. And obviously, I'm really touching a nerve here. I mean, not only did I obviously conject that the referendum would be fixed to take us out of the EU and then the country deliberately destroyed, but I introduced the Coudenhove-Kalergi agenda, although I've talked about it. In fact, I've talked about it a number of times on episodes of Humanity vs. Insanity over the past 10 months or so. But here, putting it into the presentation, putting it in perspective, and I've received a number of emails from people saying if they'd known about this before the referendum, they would have voted leave. So this is people who had voted Remain and are now saying that obviously being aware of a little bit more, just a little bit more, because there's a lot more than just this, they would have voted to come out. So we do have a tremendous opportunity here, but we do have to work at it. Meanwhile, we know that we're up against some very, very dark forces. On Thursday of this week, we are on the 11th anniversary of the London bombings. And please, I encourage people to do their own research because there are so many holes in the official narrative of this event that it's not even a good script. But these socio-psychopaths like to give the finger. They like to tell those of us who know how they play the game what they're doing. But they also like to say, you know what, there's not enough of you to bring about the changes that you'd like to see. And here was, of course, their classic brag on the side of the bus in Tavistock Square, the hoarding for the film, The Descent. And there it is in capitals, outright terror, bold and brilliant. And if anyone thinks that was a coincidence, then I have some nice beachfront property in Birmingham that you could well be interested in taking a look at. Well, meanwhile, it is July the 4th. It is Independence Day in the US, although I'm not too sure what kind of independence the US is looking at if...
Obama gets his way.
Yes. Anyway, we'll leave that to the US. We can't influence much in the US, but we have an opportunity to influence what unfolds here in the UK. Individually, we can't really do very much at all. But collectively, we have enormous power. And as more and more people are getting involved, and we know that the establishment are becoming increasingly concerned about the influence of the alternative media and also of local community groups evolving around the country to take account of events that are unfolding within their community and starting to hold their elected representatives both at local council, district council, county council and national government level and scrutinising them like never before. So it really is a tremendous opportunity, but whether or not we are able to maximise that opportunity is down to each and every one of us. So Brian, thank you very much for joining me again. I mean, obviously there's a long way to go on this particular issue.
Long way to go, but things are moving. It's an opportunity. People got to grab it. So Don't want to be too optimistic too early, but I think we've got an advantage here, and people have really got to grab it now.
Mel, any final words from yourself?
I think what we're all looking to do in this is Independence Day, is independence from corruption day, from all of them, all the parties, the Privy Council, the EU. This is what Brexit gives us, the opportunity to create a new democracy in Britain, and we can have independence from corruption day, and that's what we can call it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Brilliant.
Independence for true humanity. Meanwhile, we continue to fight against the insanity, and the way we do that is get involved. So thanks very much. Good night, and we'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.